Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. There's so much to talk about. I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited for a number of reasons because I love it when I'm talking about like connections and connecting the dots. And there's so many dots to connect at the moment. There's so much going on in the world. You've got the Iran conflict. You've got the Ukraine conflict. You've got this disentangling of Europe from American influence and this divorce that's taking place. You've got the UK trying to work out where the hell it's going. Should it get closer to the US? Should it get closer to Europe? You have then China, you have India, you have Mark Carney from Canada, obviously, going to visit Australia, and Anthony Albanese, the Australian leader, just coming out and saying, look, this is the first time we've had a leader speak in our parliament who's talking about the power of the middle powers, the power of the middle powers. You know, smaller nations like Australia, Canada, even not these big sort of imperial nations, and talk about, you know, getting together to with like-minded middle powers to drive a new pathway into the future in the world. And we've got this fracturing world, and yet we've got a number of nations and entities that are trying to not fracture, but actually come together in a way that allows them to navigate the world. I think we are beginning to realize the importance of alliances. Okay, this is NATO. NATO, unfortunately, the United States seems to be going a bit nuts at the moment, but you know, NATO really shows you that if you're Finland or if you're Estonia or if you're the UK, that actually together we are stronger. The EU shows you that whether you are Estonia or whether you are Finland or whether you're Belgium or France, you're better together. And UK is sort of trying to work, really come into this understanding, but then has to kind of relitigate old wounds and whatnot. But yeah, it's just crazy time that we're living in, and I'm really happy that you're here to listen to me spitball about my ideas, which who knows whether they're anything like accurate, but they make sense to me as they tumble out of my mouth, and I thank you for putting up with that. Look, before we go any further, please remember to subscribe if you have not subscribed to the channel already. I mean, I just have to ask that you've been punishing yourselves this long. Why have you not already clicked that icon if you hadn't? I mean, is there something seriously wrong with you? No, please, it'd be absolutely wonderful if you can. So I appreciate all of you guys. Thanks to, I think, Benny Pies, who's in the background, fielding any questions you might have. Thank you to the mods. Thank you to all the people that help out here. There's just stuff coming out all the time. I'm just reading things on these various social media platforms going, oh, I need to talk about that. Oh my goodness, that's really interesting. Oh, wow. Okay, we're going to start with Iran and the Middle East in general. In fact, an energy crisis that is developing in the world. This is hugely important, will affect Ukraine, will affect you and I, everyone, all of us. What the United States has done with Israel, in lockstep with Israel, or really possibly not in lockstep, but following behind Israel, is to create an energy crisis. And I can't imagine they wouldn't have foreseen this. And yet I don't know if they actually did predict this as seriously as it seems to be playing out, and I'm not sure they've got anything in place to really deal with this. We'll talk about that in a second. There seems to be a lot about what the Americans have done with regard to the war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, that shows a lack of foresight. For example, one might look at how they've gone to Ukraine post facto and said, oh, can you help us out with Shahed drones? Whereas if you've been planning this out sensibly, you'll be going, what are the main weapons that Iran has? Well, one, ballistic missiles, two, Shahed drones. I mean, that's what they're famous for, those two things. And you say, okay, what are we doing about ballistic missiles? Right, we're going to do this, take out the launchers, do that. We want to blow up the Archer rather than shoot the arrow. Okay, that's cool. What are we doing about Shahed drones? Well, we're going to, I don't know, find where they have them and then blow them up there. But yeah, well, okay, what if they get ballistics in the air? And what if they get Shahed drones in the air? Well, okay, we've got Patriot missiles to shoot the ballistics down. Yeah. What about Shahed drones? Oh, just forget about them. They're fine. Don't worry. Shahed drones, Shahed Shmahed. Okay. Good planning. Anyway, it turns out they're like, oh, we can't do anything about Shaheds, and they go cap in hand to Ukraine, even though Trump said yesterday that Zelensky has fewer cards. You've got fewer cards, apart from this one really big card that we want. Thank you very much. So there seems to me just and I think it's reflective of the whole campaign, the whole conflict, is there's a massive lack of coherence, strategy, plan, forethought. There's just like, right, we know where all these military things are, let's blow them up. And they're doing a really good job of that, don't get me wrong. They're going around and they're smacking the Iranian military complex they're just turning it into dust and sinking their navy, all that stuff. But then it's like, outside of that, there's not a lot of thought. So yeah, that's I guess where we're going to start. Right, let's get to it. So the Iran war is and this is coming from yesterday, so probably the chart is already out of date. The Iran war is pushing Europe towards a new energy crisis, according to Financial Times. Gas prices in Europe have jumped about 53%, driven by disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz and Iranian strikes affecting Qatar's LNG production. It's even worse now, right? Competition for LNG is intensifying as Asian buyers outbid Europe. Okay, so one of the things that is happening at the moment is tankers are redirecting from Europe. They're on the way to Europe to, I guess, sell oil, but maybe LNG as well. They're on the way to Europe to sell hydrocarbons, and then they're doing U-turns and then going to Asia, as Asia is calling them back in. And it looks like Asian nations have outbid Europe on the hydrocarbons in transit because people are so desperate. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. That is pretty worrying that we're getting outbid by Asia there. At the same time, but either way, it's going to be inflationary. At the same time, EU gas storage is under 30% full, far below the normal 45% for this time of the year, raising concerns about refilling supplies before next winter. Of course, a very cold winter in parts of Europe. If the conflict continues, energy costs, inflation, and economic pressure could rise across Europe, particularly in Germany and Italy. It's really interesting listening to people in the UK, particularly from the right wing, talk about how we should be drilling for gas. And I did talk about this yesterday. It's like, you don't really understand, right? Like, I know some of you in threads are saying, well, there's gas fields here in Lincolnshire or wherever. There are options for the UK. It's like, that's a real long-term thing. And also, it's very, very expensive. So our North Sea gas fields are depleted compared to Norway. And although it sounds great to go and drill in the North Sea and get our own gas out of the North Sea, the thing is that is really expensive. And if you do that, you might think you've got energy security, but gas goes onto the global market, and that will affect something like 0.1% of global gas supply. In other words, us producing our own gas in the North Sea will not affect the price of gas at all for us, one iota. And in fact, will make it more expensive for us. Like, the reason why we are importing gas from Norway is precisely because it is cheaper to import it from Norway than to drill our own, especially in these depleted areas that would require more investment and are expensive to do. So when you keep hearing stuff to do with net zero and we need to drill our own and energy security and, oh my God, why are we getting wind farms? Wind farms are a really good way of being able to get energy that isn't on the global marketplace and can bring energy. What we want to do is wean ourselves off gas, ostensibly. Now, people don't like the sound of that because, I don't know, they're a bit old school about things, or they seem to think environmentalism is woke, rather than actually this isn't about environmentalism, it's about economy and security. And the idea of us going around drilling for gas when the new gas is like, was it 141 pounds per megawatt hour, whereas new wind is 91 pounds, right? So the cost differential is absolutely massive. And I just don't understand people who just want to sit in the kind of Reform, Daily Mail, Daily Telegraph world where, oh my goodness, we must just embrace gas and oil because it's better and cheaper. Actually, it's neither. but we do need, good sort of base load, like I would suggest nuclear or similar. And it's not to say that gas doesn't play a role, of course, but the problem is that, like I've said before, with marginal pricing in the UK, our energy prices are coupled to gas. So we need to sort that out. Now, okay, let's go more into depth in the looking at the energy crisis. South Korean chemical plants already declaring force majeure, and no bunker fuel is left in Singapore. This is incredible. We are hearing that Asia's energy crunch is spreading fast as disruption in the Strait of Hormuz ripples across fuel markets. Singapore bunker hubs cut supply. China halts diesel and gasoline imports. South Korea Petrochem declares naphtha force majeure with Japan. And so, in other words, whatever contract we are on, this is how I understand force majeure, whatever contract we've got, things have happened that are crazy, so we need it ourselves type thing. And so on and so forth. So there is an awful lot of crazy stuff going on at the moment in the energy world. Then we hear this Qatar quote from the Financial Times. Qatar expects all Gulf energy producers to shut down all energy exports from Qatar to be shut down within weeks and drive oil to $150 a barrel. Of course, that'd be hugely beneficial for Russia. The country's energy minister, Saad Al-Kaabi, told the Financial Times in an interview published on Friday, everybody that has not called for force majeure, we expect will do so in the next few days, and that this continues. All exporters in the Gulf region will have to call force majeure. Force majeure is, as I say, it doesn't matter what contracts you've got out. Force majeure is a contractual clause that excuses parties from fulfilling obligations due to unforeseeable, uncontrollable events such as natural disasters, war, or pandemics. Well, that's what's going on. Okay. Then we go to breaking news. This is quite something, says Stephen Swinford. Qatar's energy minister told the Financial Times, as we heard, that, but it's even bigger than that. Told the Financial Times that war in the Middle East, quote, could bring down the economies of the world. So this could be like hugely recessionary. And that is what the United States and Israel have unilaterally or bilaterally decided to do. And then attacked us for not helping them. He says it will hit growth, push up energy bills, and lead to shortages of products. Now, it might not. If the Straits of Hormuz get unblocked really quickly and Iran is kind of brought to heel or whatever, then that might not happen. This is kind of a worst case scenario. Okay, so let's not scaremonger too much and doom, but it could happen. They are warning about it. Saad Al-Kaabi said that even if the war ended immediately, it would take, and here's the problem, it would take, quote, weeks to months to return to normal deliveries after the Ras Laffan plant was bombed by Iran. So even if the Strait of Hormuz was suddenly unblocked, you've got a whole host of places that have been and still are being targeted by Iran as they kind of, I don't know whether it's kind of panicking, whether they don't have the intelligence to select militarily important targets, or whether this is exactly what they want to do, which is completely screw up the world's economy as a way of. So I was saying how ridiculous that was, because they're going to get everyone involved in the war around them, like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. So they're going to use their bombers and whatever to hurt Iran. Actually, what appears to be happening, and this is possibly not sensible from Iran. I don't mean it like that, but I mean, quite canny, I guess, for Iran, which is these nations might well be now starting to put pressure on the United States to stop the war. So the leverage that Iran has is striking at undefended, huge areas of critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, blowing it up. And then Saudi Arabia or whoever says, stop, this has to stop. But the damage is done. And that's the idea here. It could take weeks to months to return to normal deliveries after, for example, the Ras Laffan plant was bombed by Iran. While only a small proportion of Qatar's gas goes to Europe, the halt in production means there will be global bidding war for what remains on the market. And here's the thing, is that we all live on a global energy market. That's kind of what I was talking about UK. Okay, drill up your own gas and it goes onto the global marketplace. So, if only a little bit comes to Europe, that still is massively affected. the prices are just going to be affected no matter where you're getting it from. Quote, this will bring down the economies of the world, he said. If this war continues for a few weeks, GDP growth around the world will be impacted. Everybody's energy price will be going higher. There will be shortages of some products, and there will be a chain reaction of factories that cannot supply. This is Qatar telling the US in the strongest possible terms to bring the conflict to an end, or everyone will face the consequences. Holy cow. Okay, that's really significant. Then we have this: Saudi Arabia, United Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar are discussing pulling back from the US and other investments as a toll from the regional war with Iran mounts. So it's not just about energy infrastructure, but it's about how recently and I guess this is part of hydrocarbon, not divestment, but recognizing that the oil can't be the future for the Middle East, in terms of, if all of their eggs are in the oil basket and you've got peak oil, then at some point demand for oil will go down. In fact, that seems to be what's happening, right? As we are seeing the power, quite literally, of electric cars, of micro generation, solar and wind, and so on and so forth. Oil will start to play second fiddle. And if your entire economy is based on that, then you're going to be screwed. So what these guys have been doing is trying to diversify and invest in all sorts of other things and do lots of other crazy stuff that means that they can sustain themselves economically going forward. But now they're like, oh, right, we need to bring some of that investment back home, because at the moment, this war is costing us. A number of Gulf countries have begun an internal review to determine whether force majeure clauses can be invoked in current contracts. So the officials, they discussed the strains being put on the budget and economies. They declined to name the states, but a bunch of these is going to be pretty obvious who this is. Also reviewing the current and future investment commitments in order to alleviate some of the anticipated economic strain from the current war. Wow. Okay, so this is not looking good economically. You could say in the United States, possibly more so with regard to investments, but I don't know for sure. Then you've got this. So this is a letter from one of Dubai's most prominent figures. This is, I don't know this person, but he's super rich, so I probably should. Khalaf Ali Habtoor. He's richer than Trump and his family, and richer than Trump and his family will ever be, even after the White House enrichments. He packs a lot of clout. He has written an open letter to Donald Trump, right? So this is Khalaf Ahmed Al Habtoor. His Excellency President Donald Trump, a direct question. Who gave you the authority to drag our region into the war with Iran? And on what basis did you make this dangerous decision? Did you calculate the collateral damage before pulling the trigger? And did you consider the first to suffer from this escalation will be the countries of the region itself? The peoples of this region have the right to ask as well, was this your decision alone? Or did it come as a result of pressures from Netanyahu and his government? You have placed the countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab countries at the heart of a danger they did not choose. Thank God we are strong and capable of defending ourselves, and we have armies and defenses that protect our homelands. But the question remains, who gave you permission to turn our region into a battlefield? For before the ink has dried on the Board of Peace initiative that you announced in the name of peace and stability, we find ourselves facing a military escalation that endangers the entire region. So where did those initiatives go? And what is the fate of the commitments made in the name of peace? Most of the funding proposed in those initiatives came from the countries of the region themselves and from Arab Gulf countries that contributed billions of dollars on a basis of supporting stability and development. And these countries have the right to ask today, where did this money go? And are we funding peace initiatives or funding a war that exposes us to danger? I hope, as an aside here, I hope the Board of Peace I hope everyone walks away from the Board of Peace and just says, it's obviously a big grifting joke, right? Because you started the Board of Peace and then went immediately to war. I really do hope he gets hauled over the coals for that, but of course he won't. To continue, because this is an absolutely astonishing bit of text. More dangerous than that, your decision does not threaten only the peoples of the region, but also reaches the American people whom you promised peace and prosperity. And here they are today, finding themselves in a war funded from their money and taxes, with costs ranging, according to the Institute for Policy Studies, between $40 and $65 billion for direct military operations, and could reach $210 billion, including economic impacts and indirect losses if it lasts 4 to 5 weeks, not to mention the sacrifice of Americans themselves in a war in which they have neither camel nor she-camel. And you have even broken your promises not to get involved in wars and to focus only on America and put it at the top of your priorities, as you ordered foreign military interventions during your second term that included 7 countries: Somalia, Iraq, Yemen, Nigeria, Syria, Iran, and Venezuela, in addition to naval operations in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific Ocean. Oh, and by the way, I'll add to this. I don't know if you know, but there are now currently military operations going on in Ecuador to clear out cartels there that the US is involved in. So while this is going on, there's also military actions taking place in Ecuador that the Americans are supporting. But anyway, it's interesting that he has now bombed more nations than any other American president in history, if I'm correct. And he's a guy that's supposed to be the peacemaker. Absolutely outrageous. You directed more than 658 foreign airstrikes in your first year in office, which equals the total strikes in Biden's entire term, for which you directed your arrows of criticism for involving the United States in foreign wars. Boom, drop mic, take that, uppercut to the chin. You should be flat out on your back now. Like, you are the one that loves to slag off Biden for X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Biden, 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 Zelensky, Zelensky, Biden, 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 Zelensky, Biden, 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 Starmer's not Churchill, Biden, Biden, Biden. And now you've got a big Middle Eastern player going, you suck more than Biden, by the way. You suck more than Biden. Your Excellency, the President. Oh, Your Excellency. These numbers have severely reflected on your approval ratings among Americans, which have declined since your inauguration for the second term by about 9% in just 400 days. Oh, that's a gut punch there. He had the uppercut, he's down, but he's got back up, Trump, and now there's a gut punch. Oh, and your polls suck because you're a loser. These numbers say something clear. Even within the United States, there is a growing concern about being dragged into a new war and about exposing the lives of Americans, their economy, and their future to unnecessary risks. True leadership is not measured by war decisions, but by wisdom, respect for others, and pushing toward achieving peace. And if these initiatives were launched in the name of peace, then we have the right today to demand full transparency and clear accountability. Ooh, I don't know if you guys, I've not been watching the comments, but that I think was an extraordinary letter. Honestly, that's a sort of thing that should be, I think, front page news. That is an excoriation from a hugely important individual in the Middle East of Donald Trump and his policies and his decision to get involved in a war in Iran. And undoubtedly, that's coming from a Sunni Muslim who probably has no love lost between themselves and Iran and the Shiite Muslim fundamentalist regime. Kobisi letter here says the US development fight. So, okay, context. What the US realized, again, lack of forethought here, what the Trump administration realized is that the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is very problematic for the cost of energy, for inflation, for the delivery of goods all over the world, right? Well, particularly hydrocarbons. And there was a scrabble about to try and work out a way that the US could allow for ships to pass through. So they, US Navy was going to escort maybe international shipping. That would be, the amount of ships that go through there is thoroughly difficult to do. And to overcome the lack of insurance coming, because obviously Lloyd's of London and other maritime insurers are not going to want to insure this traffic going through the Hormuz Straits that is got a very high probability of getting hit. So we ain't going to insure that, so we're not insuring it. So until this is sorted out, there ain't going to be no ships going through. So it's not so much, like I said to you previously, it's not so much about the actual closing of, like, it's not that that Iran has put a chain across the 22 kilometers of the Strait of Hormuz and said, right, it's closed now, you can't come through. What closes it is the inability for insured traffic to get through, because the insurance companies aren't going to insure you to go through. So then if you're struck by a drone and a missile, there's no money getting paid out and you're losing gajillions, right? So, and then also, obviously, the potential for getting struck and not wanting to run the gauntlet and so on and so forth. Now, the US said, okay, we're going to underwrite insurance, or we're going to provide escorts for boats and whatnot, trying to get out of the problem. But the US Development Finance Corporation is around $200 billion short of the capacity needed to underwrite insurance policies for ships going through the Strait of Hormuz, according to the Financial Times. The US DFC was ordered by President Trump on March the 3rd to insure vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. The DFC reportedly has $154 billion of the $325 billion needed to underwrite insurance policies. I love the fact that they've just got $154 billion sitting around. Oh, we do have that much, but it's not enough. But we got $154 billion, just like actually 155, because there was some under the sofa. Just I pulled it back and there was $1 billion there. Raising the total liability cap for the US DFC would require an act of Congress, and the traffic in the Strait of Hormuz is now down by 92%. I think it's probably even down more than that now. Nearly 20 million barrels per day of oil supplied are currently frozen. So one of the options that Trump has suggested is basically not viable. Now, the State Department is sending extra staff to Athens in Greece to aid stranded Americans, as CENTCOM requests more intelligence officers for at least 100 days of Iran operations, Politico has reported, with one official saying relatively few people had been read in on war plans. Couple of things going on here. One, Kash Patel sacked something like 100 Iran expert or Middle East experts because they were connected to investigations into Donald Trump, right? Just this was like a week before, something like a week before they struck Iran, he sacked 100 CIA or intelligence operatives working on Iran and the Middle East. Absolute insanity, just to, I guess, prove his loyalty to Trump. Now they're saying we need more intelligence officers because it turns out we just sacked 100 of them. And we need help getting our peeps out of here. It's pretty embarrassing. So, yeah, none of that is looking good. But also, it shows a lack of forethought. Again, just a massive lack of forethought. And then saying that we have relatively few people who are read up on the war plans also means that they weren't really sharing the war plans, obviously OPSEC, but they didn't go to NATO allies. They didn't go to UK or anyone else. So the idea that we should come and support the US in this war is somewhat ridiculous if we don't even know anything about the war. We're being asked to blindly follow the United States, and then if we don't, we get slagged off and slapped with embargoes and sanctions, as is the case with Pedro Sanchez in Spain, although I'm not sure that actually Trump can do that. I don't know. Incredible. I'm not going to show you painful stuff. You've got a Marine, a US Marine here, that was, I think, shouting about Israel, the war being on behalf of Israel, and he's not happy about this. Why are we going to war? He gets dragged out by a senator. His hand gets caught in a door, and they break his hand. It is not cool. It's not a cool video. So this protesting Marine gets his hand broken by the US senator, who is Tim Sheehy. Now, Tim Sheehy isn't just the reason. I wonder why he's reacting so much against this guy who is protesting about the US military doing the bidding of Israel. Turns out that Tim Sheehy from Montana has been lobbied $641,337 by AIPAC. Who are AIPAC? They are the Israeli lobby group. So the Israeli lobbyists, who have a huge amount of power right across the political spectrum in the United States, and not just with the Republicans, Democrats as well, they have a huge amount of influence, and it looks like that the American war effort, it really is on behalf of Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the only one that is totally happy about everything that's going on, really. Well, Trump and Hegseth appear to be, but in terms of like, the benefits for this war, this is what Netanyahu has been wanting for 30 years. He keeps asking American presidents, they all tell him to take a running jump, and he's had to go away with his tail between his legs. He then asks Trump, and then Trump goes, yeah, it sounds like a good idea. Meanwhile, Pete Hegseth says this. I mean, this is absolutely extraordinary.
That is why President Trump has drawn a new strategic map from Greenland to the Gulf of America to the Panama Canal and its surrounding countries. At the Department of War, we call this strategic map the Greater North America.
Just to let you know that Pete Hegseth has now said the Greater North America has Greenland, Panama Canal. I mean, they are literally telling you that they're going to, this is their vision for the future. It's the Monroe Doctrine. We call it, I mean, it's a bit too obvious to call it the United States. So we call it the Greater North America. And by the way, yes, it has Greenland in it.
Why? Because every sovereign nation and territory north of the equator, from Greenland to Ecuador and from Alaska to Guyana, is not part of the global South. It is our security perimeter in this great neighborhood that we all live in. Each one of these countries border either the North Atlantic or the North Pacific. Each one of these countries sits north of the two basic geographic barriers that exist in this region, the Amazon and the Andes Mountains. This is basic geography that we don't teach in schools as much as we should.
Okay, so the audio's a bit screwed up on that one, but essentially the idea is, we've got the Greater North America going on here. I mean, is that who we're being asked to get behind and support? Is it that kind of vision? Is Iran part of this and something like how much are we supporting the United States in supporting their strikes on Iran and their business elsewhere? Keir Starmer, again, he's talked about how he wants to be the calm, considered leader at this time, and it turns out that his position is actually the position broadly of the British public, even though our media and our opposition politicians have gone absolutely crazy at Keir Starmer. He's got the defense of doing what the people, I think, if you took out the fact that it was Starmer, because now there's this thing about Starmer, he's got a, and I don't understand, or I do understand how it's the social media and the mainstream media is just completely anti-Starmer, but he's got this kind of toxic feel now, where it's like the guy's just a pretty boring standard bloke, just speaking quite dully about things, but sometimes gets a bit angry about things, and you're like, oh yeah, nice one. But the level of vitriol concerning him has been really successfully generated online.
What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable thought-through plan.
That's the point. So let's hear that again.
Not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable thought-through plan. That remains my position.
Lawful basis and a viable thought-through plan. The point he's making there is a very important one. He has publicly said that there is no plan, that there is no thought-through plan from the United States. And that should, it's little statements like that. You could almost just listen to that and go, yeah. It's actually really important. That is pointed, and it is highly critical of the Trump regime and the war plans, and not just the war plans, but the civic plans for, or lack of civic plans for, Iran. Now, although this is recorded off the TV, like a phone off the TV, so it's not great, this is Sir Richard Sheriff. And the reason why is I don't think that Sky News liked this so much because he went to town slagging off Trump. I don't know. But so, I haven't seen this much elsewhere other than recorded off the TV like this. This is Sir Richard Sheriff, former NATO commander, going to town here. And this is well worth listening to.
Yeah, I can. All right. So,
the sound is appalling, though. So let's try and whack the sound up on this with an artificial booster just to help out. See if we can do that. Boost that up to max.
Keir Starmer kept talking about the special relationship in action And I was wondering if you thought whether the UK is doing enough.
Well, let's just squash any idea of a special relationship. It does not exist. It is a complete fantasy. America does what America wants to do, and Britain's...
So, former Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Europe NATO, General Sir Richard Sheriff, saying, don't be stupid, the special relationship doesn't exist.
It is a complete fantasy. America does what America wants to do, and Britain's got to look after its interests. And any relationship with America has got to be based on self-interest. So that's the first point. I think the second point I'd make is that Britain shooting down drones, Britain engaged in offensive or defensive operations is invidious, frankly. The fact is that if Britain is involved, our hand is in the bangle. And the so what out of that is that we should not in any way, shape or form be involved with the Americans closely, because they are being led by a couple of gung-ho nutters like Trump and Hegseth, without a proper strategy, without serious thought about what the end state for this war is. And unless we keep cool heads, as the Prime Minister is attempting to do, and think things through very, very carefully, this thing could go the way of Iraq, as your previous speaker, the former ambassador US ambassador in Bahrain, made very clearly in your earlier interview.
Well, that's interesting you say that. What is your major worry about the way?
Just absolutely astonishing there. America's being led by a couple of gung-ho nutters. Sir Richard Sheriff, the former Supreme Commander of NATO, saying that America's being led by a couple of gung-ho nutters. Absolutely insane. Can I put subtitles on? Is it that bad? The yes. And I'll have to move myself. I've boosted the sound of this as max as I can. Can it not be? Volume is very low. Yeah. It's really frustrating. I've got a volume booster that is set to like plus 600%, but it doesn't seem to have affected it as much as I would like. Let's see if you can watch the subtitles. So here we go.
That is that we should not in any way, shape or form be involved with the Americans closely, because they are being led by a couple of gung-ho nutters like Trump and Hegseth, without a proper strategy, without serious thought about what the end state for this war is. And unless we keep cool heads, as the Prime Minister is attempting to do, and think things through very, very carefully, this thing could go the way of Iraq, as your previous speaker, the former ambassador US ambassador in Bahrain, made very clearly in your earlier interview.
Well, that's interesting you say that. What is your major worry about the way that this is being conducted then?
Well, yet again, we have an American president who has gone to war, a war of choice, a war of hubris, frankly, without any clear idea of how the war ends, without any clear strategy. And as the Chinese philosopher, master of war, strategist Sun Tzu said, what, 2,500 years ago, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So the Americans might be getting frightfully excited about sinking submarines and X number of missions, bombing the Iranians to bits. But unless there's a strategy, unless they've thought through the impact of what they are doing on the minds of the Iranian people, this thing is going to go south very, very quickly. And I'll give you a good example. The idea of of assassinating the Ayatollah Khamenei, who was not just Iran's head of state, but he was the religious symbol for Shiites worldwide. Assassinating him during the month of Ramadan, frankly, is about as subtle as murdering the Pope on the steps of St. Peter's in Holy Week. It will inflame the Shiite world. And what you're doing by doing that is probably pushing large numbers of Iranians who might have been reconcilable, who might have thought about rising up, back into the folds of the irreconcilable.
I'm going to speak now. You can turn your volume back down. So what we have here is Sir Richard Sheriff saying that the Americans have no plan. He's very calling gung-ho nutters with no plan, not having basically learnt from Iraq and essentially giving any religious fanatic who might see Khamenei as, the number one guy, giving them permission to rise up against the Americans and unify against these what might be seen as imperial powers. So, Sir Richard Sheriff there is actually right on the money as far as I'm concerned, but highly, highly critical in a way that we wouldn't often see from a former military commander of that stature, right? So what you have in the UK, and I wonder if it's the same elsewhere in Europe, but maybe it's because we've got a really divisive media in the UK that doesn't really. So in other countries, I think they probably have, I don't know, but a proportion of media in the UK are that it is not far right, but arguably far right and right leaning is huge. It's overwhelming. Like I've said to you before, there's like 9 newspapers on the right and 2 newspapers on the left. So it is overwhelmingly skews to the right. And they are all attacking Starmer and seeming to be very pro-Trump and supporting Iran. And yet the population in the UK is not feeling that. And so they haven't really taken a barometer reading of where the UK population is, and they are trying to ideologically skew reality to their own agenda. And I don't know if that's happening in Europe by and large, because although you've got people like AFD have come out kind of supportive, AFD have come out sort of supportive of Iran, though, weirdly. We'll come to that later, though. But anyway, here is a the claim here is that Starmer is actually in line with the British public. Ignore the commentators criticizing him. They're paid to talk the country down. What Britons think the UK military response to the US-Iran conflict should be. So purple here should be purely defensive. Blue is retaliatory, attacking military targets that have launched attacks against civilian areas. And red should be like full on joining the US and Israel, launching attacks on a wide range of targets. And it turns out that the red is what you want to look at. Forget the all Brit. Well, all Britons is basically most of us. This purple is Starmer's position. It's a mixture of those two, really. And the red is what the right-wing media sources are saying, and what politicians like Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, that's what they're saying. But actually, no one of the Greens really agrees with that. No one in Labour, no one in Lib Dems. 15% of Conservatives think that. So even though it's a massive increase in Conservative thought thinking that, it's generally still quite a significant minority. And even though it's most significant for Reform voters, actually the vast majority of Reform voters think it should either be defensive or retaliatory, which is not supporting the US, willy-nilly. So it is an interesting spike in support for the US from Conservatives and Reform. That's what we've come to expect. That's what their newspapers are saying. But the general public in the UK is actually support, whether they know it or not, is supportive of the government's position. And that is really, really important. Or, as Richard Bennett says, Badenoch and Farage are up Trump's backside. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Now, here we have Andrew Neil, who's a Conservative commentator who I've agreed with a couple of times recently. He's been on the money on a few things, and he has been critical of Trump a lot. But he's also been massively anti-Starmer and massively anti our government, and saying we should support this. And why aren't the ships? Why don't we have the ships to go and support? I mean, one of the criticisms that keeps coming out of the UK is that Cyprus was hit with this one drone. We don't even know where. The UK has now said it was an Iranian drone. So then the UK government has probably belatedly said, okay, we'll get HMS Dragon out there, but we've already got jets out there, right? And the jets are themselves defensive. They're shooting down drones, right? But we'll get HMS Dragon out there, but it'll take a long time, and it does have air defense capabilities. And then Greece have said, well, we're going to get a ship out there. Italy have said, we're going to get stuff out there. And France have said, we're going to get stuff out there. And they've got stuff going on away. So then the right-wing media ecosystem has started criticizing Starmer for like, well, how come they've got ships out there and we don't? Without realizing that Britain's on the northern side of Europe and the French have like a Mediterranean coastline with like Toulon and big ports there, Italy too. And Greece are right next door to freaking Cyprus and also have Greek Cypriot, like their relationship to Cyprus is far greater than the British relationship to Cyprus, right? So the idea they're like, oh my God, like you're getting a ship out there and it's going to take a week. Well, these guys can get ships there really quickly. Yeah, because they live next door. Okay, so there is some criticism that could be leveled in terms of like there's not enough forethought. The problem is our Navy has been underfunded for so long that we just don't have the ships we used to have. Which is a genuine issue, but it's not like a labor issue. That's a 30-foot. That's a peace dividend issue that has happened over decades and decades of underfunding of the armed forces. So we definitely, I think would like to get stuff out there more quickly, and maybe with some forethought, we should have had some stuff out there. But the problem is we weren't told by the Americans. I mean, this is half the issue, is that the Americans went and did this with the Israelis and said, we're going to do this, by the way. And we're like, oh, you didn't tell us. And then they say, oh, can you help us? We're like, yeah, but you didn't tell us and you've given us those plans. Yeah, but can you help us? Well, probably not, because A, it's illegal, B, it's unconstitutional, and C, we have no idea what you're doing. Yeah, but if you don't help us, we're going to punish you. Hang on, what? Yeah, we're going to put Spain, we're going to put sanctions on you, embargoes, tariffs. Yeah, we're punishing you for not helping us. But didn't you hear us say it was illegal, unconstitutional, and there were no details, and you've got no plan going forward, and so on and so forth? Yeah, I heard you don't really care because my name's Trump. I can do what I like. So Andrew Neil here says Starmer has picked a fight with our most important ally at a time of grave global peril and a hollowed out British military. It was a stupid thing to do. As Chris Doyle says, most Americans, like most Brits, oppose this war. Starmer did not pick a fight. He decided not to join one. And the framing is so wrong here, like that Starmer's picked a fight. No, Trump and Netanyahu picked a fight, and we're not joining in. We're not picking a fight. The hollowed out British military isn't the problem, isn't Starmer's fault. It was not a stupid thing to do. Actually, it was a clever thing to do because it's illegal and we don't want to commit our strained military resources into smacking the crap out of Iran if there is no imminent threat from Iran to us and it's not legal. So, but what you see there from Andrew Neil is so freaking typical at the moment. Here we've got Adam Brooks, who's another one. This is guy's a like full-on reform journalist blokey. Keir Starmer is the worst and most cowardly prime minister in our history. I'm ashamed to be British right now. That's what you're seeing the whole time is Adam Brooks on GB News. Also, so what? Okay, the context here. So then you've got, and Europeans are going to have to deal with this as well, potentially, is you have a war in Iran, and that is presently causing quite a migration uptick across the borders from Iran. Iran has already recently seen quite a bit of refugee movement into Europe, into UK, right? So you've got Nigel Farage saying, we hate immigrants. We hate immigrants. And then Nigel Farage saying, we want to bomb Iran. We want to bomb Iran. Why aren't we supporting the US? And then everyone else saying, by the way, Nigel, if you bomb the crap out of Iran, there are going to be loads of immigrants and they are going to be wanting to come to the UK. And he's like, no, we're not going to take them. Hang on. You can't say you're going to bomb Iran and then not have some plan as to what goes on with the refugees. If you did not learn anything from Syria, do you not learn anything from Libya? I mean, honestly, it's ridiculous. So Adam Brooks says Keir Starmer's terrible. He should have supported the US. I'm ashamed to be British. And then when he's pressured on, well, what happens about refugees, he says, I don't want them here. As a British citizen, I don't want one. Okay, so you don't want to accept Iranian refugees, but you do want to blow up Iran. I just want to get that right. Is that right, Adam Brooks? Yes, that is. Okay, you're an idiot. Jada Franson here says, yesterday this guy was ashamed to be British because Keir Starmer didn't agree to send our men to fight in a foreign war. And today, I don't want them here. Do these people seriously not see the correlation between our meddling in foreign regimes and the subsequent immigration influx. But then there are cynics who say that's exactly what they want, which is an immigration influx that then can get them elected because, oh, look at all these immigrants trying to come across the channel into our country. Oh, my goodness, you need to vote reform. So maybe it's actually not a bug, it's a feature. Here is James O'Brien, one of the few kind of one of the few somewhat supportive of the government on media these days.
Why is the corporate media in the United Kingdom backing a foreign war over its own democratically elected prime minister? Why is the corporate media in the United Kingdom supporting a deranged lunatic's quite probably illegal adventures in Iran over its own sovereignty? Why do they hate sovereignty so much? They're literally now writing columns about how in the good old days we'd follow America blindly into war regardless of the reasons or the consequences. 8% of the British public sit alongside the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail and the Daily Express and the Sun, and to a lesser extent the Times. 8% sit along Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage and the other brain-dead warmongers. 8% of the British population. Who speaks for them? Who speaks for them? That's actually a rhetorical question, because the answer is nobody. Living in a country with a pluralistic media, who speaks for the people who aren't in the 8% that don't want a war?
Really good point. And there needs to be a massive discussion about the media in the UK and I think around the world. Now, Axel Springer is going to buy the Telegraph. So the Telegraph was going to be bought by the Daily Mail, right, which would have made it even worse. Axel Springer, a big German media conglomerate, is now put in a surprise £575 million deal for Axel Springer. Axel Springer is pretty much like the Daily Telegraph. It is, correct me if I'm wrong, German listeners, but I think it's like traditionally a centre-right, pro-free market, kind of old classical liberal outlook. Although behind closed doors, I believe that the CEO is actually anti-woke and right-wing populist. And actually, there's some communication to suggest that we see this quite a lot, which is, the Telegraph pretends it's all like, oh yeah, we're old school conservatism, pro free market, blah blah blah. But actually, when you start scraping away at the veneer, you see that actually they're anti-woke. They're like the Daily Telegraph, but just with bigger sheets. They're like the Daily Mail, but with bigger sheets. And so you've seen the Telegraph move in this populist direction. Well, apparently, I think Axel Springer is somewhat like that. So it probably is a good fit, I guess. But I think it's also probably an improvement that it's not going to be the Daily Mail owning the Daily Telegraph. Right. I want to then show you this, but I keep getting hit by copyright infringements because the company that makes BBC's Question Time, Mentorn, obviously have tight YouTube copyright bot scrapers. George Monbiot here was brilliant on BBC Question Time last night. And in fact, what was really interesting about BBC Question Time is that usually it's really reform dominated and very populist, and you don't get a fair set of people on there that I think give enough views to the spectrum. It was quite narrow last night by point of fact that you had, you had Conservative, Labour, and then from a media point of view, Daily Telegraph and George Monbiot from The Guardian, and then you had a military expert. And it was kind of like these two sides going at it. But what was interesting is that James Cleverly from the Conservatives and the Daily Telegraph panelist, their arguments didn't really cut through. Fiona Bruce, as the host, said in the audience, put your hands up if you would support the US going to war, and basically no one put their hands up, which was exactly what James O'Brien's just saying. Like, very few people support this rhetoric, so why are we listening to it all the time from our media and from these particular politicians? George Monbiot here said, I'd like to congratulate Annabelle, who's the Daily Telegraph columnist, on being so wrong on so many issues. In one single answer, it must be a just about world record. right? So going to town. Now you had, and again, I'd love to play this for you, but I will get a copyright infringement. But he basically says the Brexit press, this lad in the audience, the Brexit press, the Telegraph and the Sun are pushing war alongside Trump. The public isn't buying it. What's going on here? And Britain suddenly finds itself closer to Spain and Europe than the Brexit USA media narrative, says Liz Webster. But this guy here says, why we're standing up to a bully? We should, why do we listen to the right-wing press all the time that advocates for supporting Trump in this? He's starting to get audience members saying stuff like this. Here's another one who said the hypocrisy of saying Putin's war is illegal while trying to usher through Trump's illegal war as if Britain should be a lapdog to the United States is breathtaking. Just absolutely on point. And this, we need more of listening to some of the British people rather than listening to either the Daily Express or Kemi Badenoch. Here is Kemi Badenoch on TV getting it handed to her by Charlie State on the BBC. And I'm going to play you this, and hopefully, you'll be able to hear this a little better with the audio. So let's listen to Kemi Badenoch being questioned in a way that she should be. She's a leader of the opposition.
What?
My goodness, why is everything? Have I knocked my? Oh, I've knocked my microphone. That's why.
What else are our jets doing? Just hanging around there?
Can I just pick up on a phrase you used a moment ago?
Jets hanging around there. So this is the phrase that he picks her up on. Absolutely brilliant, and I love this. Don't use phraseology like that without thinking. You are denigrating our armed forces and what they are doing and the strategy behind what they are doing. Kemi Badenoch, I think, is not a good leader of the Conservative Party, and she doesn't do her research. She's famously, and it's not just me slagging her off, famously people around her say she doesn't do her research, she doesn't read her briefs, and she kind of on the one hand wings it, but also has a script that is written for her
what else are our
Prime Minister's questions. But then when that's already been sorted out or answered or debunked, she'll still go by the script, and it's like, well, that question's already been answered, it's pointless. So she just doesn't do a very good job. Anyway, I like this.
What else are our jets doing? Just hanging around there?
Can I just pick up on a phrase you used a moment ago? You said that what are our jets, British jets, RAF jets, doing there at the moment? You just said they're just hanging around. Now, the evidence we have from the British government, from the British military, is that they have been involved in shooting down missiles and drones. Mm-hmm. You just said, what are they doing there? They're just hanging around.
We know that
you mentioned before about the issue of all of us, to a degree, not having operational knowledge, because that's the way these things work. But you have characterized what is already happening by the British military, by the RAF, as just hanging around.
What I've said is that they are catching arrows. They need to get the Archer.
You used the phrase catching arrows.
Yes.
What they're actually doing is shooting down drones, which will cause damage, and they're shooting down missiles that are heading to the Middle East.
And it's been so long since we've heard other politicians like Farage and Badenoch being held to account by the stuff they say. Anyway, I know this is very British-centric. We're just going to move on to Europe now. But this is Peter Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens' brother. Christopher Hitchens, the firebrand liberal atheist. I read many of his books. Used to love watching a bit of Christopher Hitchens. Peter Hitchens is like his... the other side of the Hitchens coin. So he's a religious conservative, right? They didn't see eye to eye, clearly. But Peter Hitchens sometimes nails it. I'm not a fan of him at all, but he's got it right here. What distresses me is that many Tories claiming to be British conservative patriots joined in this foreign mockery of the head of our government. We have in our midst far too many people who think that being a Trumpoid Republican is the same as being a British right-winger. It is not. We are getting this situation where we are at present, and I'm now going to bring this in from later, actually, this next one is pertinent. There's this idea that Trumpian republicanism is being imported into the United Kingdom to become this new conservatism. And it's not conservatism, it's populism, and it's dangerous populism. The Byline Times has a piece on reforms plans to import Trump's authoritarian Project 2025 blueprint to the UK. Far from defending British independence, reform and its by-election candidate Matt Goodwin, the guy that actually failed to win in Denton and Gorton and Denton, are taking blueprints and cash from a global network of American hardliners. American influence is paying for think tanks and right-wing populism to gain a foothold in the UK. Nigel Farage is Donald Trump 2.0. Do not vote for him and do not vote for reform. You will get Trumpism. If you like Trumpism, fair enough. I'm not a fan. It's dangerous, it's divisive, and it's not good for the UK. Right, okay, going on to now a bit of Spain. This is a Spanish Minister of Culture speaking to Channel 4 News, and I'm going to play this to you because I think it is on point and very, very reflective.
Democratic countries who believe in international law and multilateralism have to stand up. There's no other choice. I mean, if we just accept one after the other all the vulnerations and dismiss of international law in every scene, what kind of world are we going to build in the 21st century? I mean, at a certain moment, we need to say no. We need to say stop. And like the UK, in Spain has a very strong memory of what happened with the illegal war of aggression to Iraq in 2004. We learned from that lesson, and we are not going to repeat that mistake again.
Who else in Europe agrees with you, do you think? And is there any kind of international coalition being gathered to try and stop the aggression?
Well, I think that there is a growing sense at EU level that it's completely useless to continue appealing to Donald Trump's vanity or personal interests. I mean,
what a statement here from the Spaniard. We in the EU, there's a general feeling we shouldn't keep appealing to his vanity and personal interest.
I think that there is a growing sense at EU level that it's completely useless to continue appealing to Donald Trump's vanity or personal interests. I mean, this is over. I mean, I think that many people in Europe are now describing a Spanish position as realist, because at a certain moment, you cannot accept to play down your own values and your own interests just because you want to please Donald Trump. That thing is over. And secondly, I think, and this is very important, what happens if we accept these kind of vulnerations of international law? What will happen, for instance, to our positions in defending Denmark's territorial integrity?
Did you feel betrayed by the German Chancellor as he sat next to Donald Trump and said nothing to defend Spain? He left you hanging.
Well, I'm not going to comment about that meeting. This is up to Chancellor Merz. But what I can say is that we have felt a very strong European solidarity after the trade comments by Donald Trump. I mean, you probably heard in the last hours, Vice President of the European Commission, Stéphane Séjourné, he was very strong saying that any attack to the trade interests of Spain is an attack to the whole EU, because, as you know, trade policy belongs to the European Union and the European Commission. So we feel supported and we feel protected.
So is it your belief that Trump can't target Spain? I mean, he suggested he wanted to sort of cut off all your trade.
Well, look, how serious can you take these threats after the US Supreme Court decided to just vote down anything that he decided in the past when it comes to tariffs? I mean, it's very difficult now to take seriously these kind of threats. So that is not something that we are afraid of.
The war is on, and theoretically, at least, the United States is your ally. Are you saying you want them to lose?
We just want to de-escalate. I mean, the Spanish government position has been very clear. And we have learned from the past, there were other ways of dealing with the Iranian nuclear program. And I am afraid that this war of aggression is only going to make things worse also inside Iran. So what are we calling now as the Spanish government is for de-escalation, to try to stop the different military actions that are being developed at the moment and to resume talks and dialogue. This is what we're aiming for.
I thought that was worth dipping into there. So that was the Spanish minister there talking, I think, very cogently about Spain's position and the threats from the US and the support that Spain is getting from the European Union. Now, I've talked about this at length. This is one of my kind of themes of what is going on geopolitically at the moment. You've got this divorce of Europe from the United States. And the other day, I mean, I found this an extraordinary picture. This, I mean, it blows my mind, just the size of this. And so Macron, I talked about this the other day. Macron came in on I think it was on a jet, flanked by 2 French helicopters, then landed here as a massive French nuclear submarine. He's got these military personnel. He's speaking in front of a bunch of people there who are then they sing the Marseillaise together. This is a real sense of French nationalism coming through and French strength. This is Macron and France flexing and saying, we've got nukes. Europe, do you want to get on board? And then you've got a bunch of European nations who are now saying, yep, we are happy to help fund a kind of European nuclear umbrella. You've got Finland now saying publicly that they will host, for the first time, they will be okay with hosting nuclear weapons on Finland, and they will be probably French. UK is going to have to work out what part we play in this kind of arrangement. But ostensibly, you have France saying, we need to move away from American dependence. Macron opens the door to deploying French nuclear forces to European allies. We must strengthen our, it's a major evolution, this plan. We must strengthen our nuclear deterrence in the face of a combination of threats, and we must consider our deterrence strategy in the depth of the European continent with the full respect of our sovereignty, with a gradual implementation of what I would call advanced deterrence. With an aggressive Russia on Europe's borders, the article says, and growing uncertainty about the solidity of American security guarantees, countries including Germany and Sweden have expressed interest in how France's nuclear deterrence might be expanded. Successive French presidents have said the vital interests covered by French nuclear deterrence include a European dimension. Right, okay. So this was a big thing, and there was some, I think, really there's a lot of PR going on here, but there's a lot of very important, I think, French positioning and statements going on. It is, I think, important to note. Where do we have it? I'm going to bring in this next. It's important to note that here are the American bases in Europe, right? And what you don't have is an American base in France. Charles de Gaulle, back in, what was it, the 60s, kicked out the US from France. And this is when you started having the desire not to be dependent. He saw that if the American bases were continued to be in France, that France would therefore be dependent on the Americans going forward. Matt Kennard here says, France is the only major country in Western and Southern Europe with no US troops or bases. Charles de Gaulle kicked them all out in 1966. He knew their presence would ensure French remained a supplicant of Washington. The rest of Europe should follow this lead. It's time. Okay, so you got this idea that, both the US kind of wanting NATO to be a thing of the past. That's that kind of American isolationism where we're going to have Greenland, we're going to have Canada, we're going to have Mexico, we're going to have Venezuela, we're going to have Cuba. This is our area of the world. We'll stay over here. You guys sort out your own problems. Retreat from NATO. But at the same time, they also keep saying, well, no, you need to buy weapons off us. No, you guys definitely can't develop your own nuclear capabilities. So, for example, where do we have it? Oh, I had this lined up. But basically, you've got the Americans saying no to Poland. I did have it, but I've lost it. Basically, Poland have said that they are interested in developing nuclear capabilities. The US has said, no, we don't want you doing that. The same can be said for like Germany thinking about it potentially. So the US is saying, no, you can't do that. And then Europe saying, hang on, you can't have it every way. You can't determine our future. You can't determine whether, it's like Spain saying, we don't want to support the war in Iran. And then the US saying, well, we're going to sanction the crap out of you. It's like, hang on, we need some kind of sovereignty here. If you're saying that we need to stand up on our own 2 feet and have our own, pay for our own defense and this and that, and then at the same time you get to demand what we do at all times, that doesn't square. You can't square that circle. So there is this kind of, I guess, sense that the Americans want their cake and they want to keep their cake and they want to be able to eat it at the same time. And Europeans are finding a bit of a problem with that. Anyway, France is trying to lead this kind of move away from American dependence. And we have here, France will stop sharing their healthcare data with companies from the United States. To the end of 2026, they will switch to European system. They've already turned off, I think, in the government, Microsoft Teams, and I think Google. They're now using Visio and their own French provision. Macron is on a mission for European sovereignty, is the claim there. Then we have Thierry Breton, who is the former, what was he? He was massive in the European Union, but he's now not, but he's French. He said the so-called French grasshopper has been paying for the European ants all along. This is a really interesting piece that he's written. President Macron's speech at Île Longue, so that big speech in front of that sub, marks a historic turning point. For the first time, France openly acknowledges that its nuclear deterrent protects not just its own territory, but Europe as a whole. So that used to be the American umbrella that took responsible for nuclear protection of Europe. Now France is stepping up, which is kind of what the Americans have been asking for, but they don't like it when it actually happens. 7 EU member states have now recognized that European security rests in part on the French nuclear strike force, an implicit admission that France has been footing part of their bill, something many partners had long denied. So France has spent, and people talk about how much the UK spends on its defense, right? And saying, why don't we have all these ships and all these troops and all this? You do realize, and I'm talking about British people here, you do realize, British press, that the UK spends an awful lot on nukes in a way that, Germany, Finland, Sweden don't, right? Because they're not nuclear states. Same with France, right? They spend a lot on nuclear deterrence so that others don't have to, but it means that they get to spend more on ships and stuff and kit. So when the British are like lacking in certain things, well, it's partly because we're spending an awful lot on nukes that other nations don't have to. So then there's this kind of desire for other nations to pay in part for European or for French and or British nuclear deterrence capabilities. So this has been long denied, says Breton. Since 1945, France has invested between 400 and 450 billion euros in today's money to build, maintain, and modernize its deterrent ballistic missile submarines, warheads, airborne components, infrastructure, research. This is not an accounting vanity. So it's not just like when you're designing nuclear submarines, like these things are more expensive than a conventional submarine, and they take a lot more research, and that's a lot more of a cost in this case to France, but same for the UK. It's just a big cost that other countries don't have to bear because they don't have nuclear capabilities because of nuclear proliferation treaties and so on and so forth. Okay, it's a structural, strategic choice made by enormous budgetary and political cost, made at enormous budgetary and political cost. While France was making that bet, the European ants were investing sheltered under the American nuclear umbrella in their welfare, competitiveness, and infrastructure. That was their right, but they paid a different price. Strategic alignment with Washington, normative influence, dependency. Europe has lived with a silent asymmetry, one actor paying for continental stability, while others outsourcing the nuclear function. The Île Longue speech makes that asymmetry visible and political in the best sense. France has no interest in billing its partners, but it must assert its singularity, full nuclear sovereignty, massive financial effort, explicit extension of that guarantee to European security. 3 work streams now open up. So basically what you're seeing is the framework or the foundations being laid for NATO to become defunct, and a European security architecture to replace it, and American dependency is no longer a thing. But of course the US want to pull out of NATO, want NATO not to exist from a kind of isolationist Trumpian point of view, but they also want to still have the power over Europe to dictate what Europe does. So it still needs NATO. Europe, with this kind of vision, is looking past NATO into a future where France and maybe the UK are providing the backbone of some kind of security arrangement with regard to at least nuclear capabilities. So France has no interest in billing its partners, says Breton, but it must assert its singularity, full nuclear sovereignty, massive financial effort, explicit extension of that guarantee to European security. 3 work streams now open up: political recognition by the 26, a budgetary reckoning with the Stability Pact, and an end to the simplistic fable of virtuous European ants versus a spendthrift French grasshopper. The European ants underinvested in their own security. The so-called French grasshopper paid alone for everyone. This window won't stay open for long. Europe must acknowledge what France has already built, already paid for, and will need to invest in further. That contribution deserves recognition commensurate with what it delivers to the continent. So Breton's saying everyone else needs to step up, possibly financially. It's not that we're going to bill you, but there needs to be some recognition that financially you guys need to be responsible for a bit more. Now, I just want to show you this. This is like the PR element to what Macron seems to be doing, and this is kind of his swan song, right? He's going to be diving out in 2027. I don't know if he can't any longer run for president, but generally French presidents are unpopular. They're just by default. He's been very unpopular, but I don't know whether he's starting. I don't know. Let me know if you're French, if his poll numbers are moving upwards, because he's certainly being assertive on the global, in the global political landscape. And I've got a lot more time for Emmanuel Macron, but also like this is how to do a bit of cool PR. I love that. His jet was flanked by 2 fighter jets, not helicopters, as I said earlier. And it's just like this is I think positive nationalism. It's not jingoistic. It's you got your French flag, you've got your armed forces, you're flexing, you've got a big nuclear submarine, you've got your jets accompanying the president, you're singing the national anthem, and this is about strength. This isn't about us and them. Jingoistic nationalism. This is a really, I think, healthy and I think needed sense of nationalism at this kind of time. And I just think that was quite good PR from Macron there and for Macron and for France. Now, just to go back to the UK, in its place in Europe, Ireland will allow the British Royal Navy to patrol its waters and is set to deepen naval cooperation. I mean, they did already to some degree with Britain and France to counter Russian threats, according to the Daily Telegraph. So UK sort of needing to work out its place in Europe. And indeed, the business secretary, so talking about our place in Europe and the UK, business secretary warns that barriers will end up harming EU companies just as much as British and hobble Europe in the economic fight with China. And so therefore we need to bring down barriers. And there's been this push for the UK to get closer to Europe, while signs of victory for the UK lobbying after Peter Kyle's visit to Brussels last week. I did report this previously. Financial Times reports that European Commission is now proposing made in Europe rules that would include Britain and other allies. So we can then get in on the made in Europe thing. That will help our industry. Now, you had Roberta Metsola, who is the European, I get confused with all the different, she's a president of the European, what part of the Europe? She's president of European Parliament. That's it, the Parliament, not the Council, not the Commission, European Parliament. So all those MEPs in Parliament, she's a president. She came to London, gave a really good speech talking about Britain's position in Europe. She came to the Chatham House and she gave this speech. I'm not going to go through it, but it's well worth listening to. European Union and the United Kingdom can steer their own ship. So there's this desire for both the EU and the UK to have a closer union. I think in a perfect world for, say, Starmer and the EU, the UK just come back into the European Union, and it would be like it never happened, and we'll get on with hanging out together again. But that's politically very toxic in the UK, although it's changing at the moment. Polls are changing. 5 million people have died who invariably would have voted, older people voted Brexit. 6 million people have come into the age of being able to vote who are 80% pro rejoin, right, or something like that. So these political sands are moving. I think Labour would probably be best off just ahead of the next election, to campaign for the next election in 2029, they should just embrace rejoining the EU and have that as the line in the sand. Because I think if they do some kind of weird middle ground, it's going to be reform, and Tories don't seem to be anywhere at the moment. It's going to be reform against the Greens, and Greens are pro rejoining. So unless Labour like grasp that nettle, I think they'll just get lost in the next elections. Now, Metsola and Keir Starmer talking about, you know, a future being built on stronger links that benefit both the EU and the UK. Now is the time to shape a partnership that reflects the world as it is, not as it once was. So, okay, you're out of the EU. Let's assume you're not coming back in. However, you know, there are people in the Labour Party, a lot of Labour politicians who would love to get a lot closer to the EU, and more so than just a single market and the customs union. On the other side of the political coin in Europe, you have AfD, Eurosceptics, far-right party in Germany. Here we have the AfD essentially, they're saying, with great concern, we have taken note of Israel's and the USA's attacks on Iran. We call on all parties to the conflict to exercise unconditional restraint. The civilian population and civilian infrastructure must remain protected. International law and humanitarian international law must be observed without restriction. The renewed destabilization of the Middle East is not in Germany's interest and must be brought to an end. So, on the attack on Iran and the situation in the Middle East. So, AfD coming out as against the attacks. Now, what's interesting here is that, and by the way, we haven't heard from JD Vance, the vice president, for an awful long time. He's gone very quiet, probably because he was against the types of military interventions that the strikes on Iran are, right? But also, he's one that's come to Europe and shouted about how wonderful AfD is. You know, you've got Elon Musk doing that. You've got even Marco Rubio, like the State Department, cozying up to the far right in Europe. We've seen it with Viktor Orban and Robert Fico, Rubio visiting them. Well, the AfD, big fans of MAGA, and MAGA are big fans of the AfD. However, the AfD here very clearly being against the war in Ukraine. Very clearly being against America's strikes on Iran. How does the United States react to that from the government? Is it a little bit uncomfortable for them? Vance's favorite German political party comes out pro-Iran. I don't think it's pro-Iran, to be honest. They are also pro-Beijing and pro-Moscow, of course. So, yeah, that's of interest. Right, a little bit on Ukraine. Boris Johnson, former UK Prime Minister. Why have we taken Ukraine's NATO membership off the table? Because we don't think Putin would agree to a deal. But the idea that it wants a deal is delusional. Don't retreat in advance of Putin. It's pathetic. I completely agree with this, by the way. We are backing Ukraine, but we can't agree what the war aim is. The aim should be victory for Ukraine. You are never going to do a deal with Putin if your policy is to do a deal. That's a really interesting, that's a very strong pro-Ukrainian position, this, Boris Johnson, which is, you know, unsurprising. I mean, the living mop head here is a strong supporter of Ukraine, and he found a lot of solace in support for Ukraine when he was in trouble politically in the UK. He said, Ukraine is fundamentally unconquerable. Putin has proved it is a great nation and wants its freedom. This is a war of independence, and it will end with Ukraine's independence. But there will be a lot of bloodshed until the Ukrainians get the help they need. Absolutely on board with what he said there. And it really frustrates me that the US has said that Ukraine can't join NATO, and yet NATO really needs Ukraine. That expertise, how to shoot down Shaheds, how to deal with massive airstrikes, NATO could probably do with that right now. They're asking Ukraine to help. That help will be there if they that interoperability concerning dealing with drone and missile strikes, the interceptor drones and all that kind of thing, you get NATO standard stuff coming from Ukraine, but no, it's off the table. I don't understand it. And we have Putin's top officials laugh about how dumb Trump is behind his back, according to the Daily Beast. This is coming from the UK intelligence. I have reported this before to you, but I just want to give you a little bit more detail. Gandalf talks about it here. Just incredible, this. And Trump needs to know this. So here's a part nobody in Washington wants on a bumper sticker. British intelligence has reportedly been showing the Americans intercepted Russian calls and messages in which senior Russians mock Trump privately and treats his read of Putin as childishly naive. The line from a senior UK security source is brutal in its simplicity. They have continually presented intelligence showing the Russians are lying and that Russians are laughing about it behind closed doors. Putin is not negotiating in good faith and does not want to end the war. Not a peace deal, not a freeze, not a real estate swap. The Kremlin wants time, leverage, and a Western headline it can weaponize. Now, of course, we heard Trump yesterday ignore all of this. So he might have been shown this, but he doesn't care. He's not listening, whatever, because he came out and said that Zelensky is the obstacle to the peace process. And he's blaming Zelensky again. However, to continue, and that is why this matters for Europe. Allies are apparently trying to drag the United States back to evidence-based policy by showing receipts. Meanwhile, Russia's leadership is allegedly treating the US president like an influencer they can manage with flattery. If your peace process requires your allies to pass you wiretaps proving that the other side is laughing at you, you're not brokering peace. You're being used as set dressing. And I think that is pretty much on point. Sorry, I didn't have that shown for you, but there you go. That is the situation coming from the British revelations, British intelligence revelations of what the Russians are saying behind closed door, that they have apparently got to Trump. But, unfortunately, I don't think he's actually listened enough. Last thing I'm going to show, I meant to do a video on this kind of stuff previously. This is pretty incredible. Now, Friedrich Merz has just been to China. This is going back a few days, a week. I can't remember when. You've got this company in China called Unitree. And Unitree's robots do insane stuff. Now, it's not AI, as far as I understand. This would be like programming. But you can imagine that you add this to AI and give it another 10 years, give these things a gun, and we are in Terminator times. Or so it might be worth your while just putting into someone like Twitter, you go Unitree and you can see some of these videos. They are absolutely insane. And it does make you worry about, what the future might look like. This is not AI, this is real. So they're doing this with aerial drones, that kind of coordination. They're also doing it with robotic drones as well. So anyway, there you go. Just something to, I guess, scare you a little bit. France's Crédit Agricole has the desire to expand its activities in Ukraine. National Bank of Ukraine First Deputy Governor has said. That's good. Investment into Ukraine is really, really important. Right. So just very quickly, because I've been going on too long, Claude and Anthropic. I talked to you previously about how Anthropic as an AI company has had a disagreement with the Pentagon, and that they had these two red lines. We don't want Anthropic AI to be used for mass surveillance of American population. Fourth Amendment in the Constitution. So there is that. And also they don't want them to be used in kill chains with no, they don't want their AI to be used in kill chains with no human intervention. In other words, just leaving it up to AI. Remember that AI, when it's being war gamed, will 95% of the time push the red button to have a nuclear war when they've been wargaming AI's ability to make decisions concerning politics and nuclear war. They will just generally go for nuclear war. So is that what you want in control of autonomous drones at the moment? Probably not. So you've got Dan Amadei, Darren, what's his name? Darren. Anyway, the guy in charge of Anthropic said, no, we're not doing that, when Pete Hegseth said, you must do this. Then they've been threatened with essentially being cut off from the American economy by saying, anyone that has anything to do with Anthropic, that has their model Claude, anyone that uses Anthropic or is invested in it is going to get punished by the American government, and they've gone to town on Anthropic. It's called this massive argument. People then, because Sam Altman, who's the guy that runs OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, that's one of the competitors to Anthropic. In fact, Anthropic came out of OpenAI, if I remember correctly. So they were worried about some of the issues in OpenAI and wanted to start out a more ethical company. And some people say, Anthropic is no more ethically minded than OpenAI, but I would disagree. I think it is somewhat more. Anyway, you've had some people then closing down ChatGPT accounts and starting up Claude accounts because they are morally, it seems morally somewhat more upstanding. And there's been this massive public argument between Anthropic and the American government. And it turns out that it's not just that, but actually we have had Amadei, the guy, said that the reason why Anthropic were punished by the Department of War is because they had not contributed financially to Trump's government, the inauguration, whatever. Sam Altman, Google, all these companies have given money to Trump directly. These guys haven't. And that's apparently what started the American government getting peed off, because they hadn't paid Trump moolah. Absolutely incredible. Now, this argument is then becoming international because France has Mistral, again, the French. They are, and Mistral's a really decent AI engine. They have Mistral as a competitor to some of the big American AI firms, but there isn't the power infrastructure or the data center infrastructure in across Europe. Although Germany is, I think, doing things to change that at the moment. And now Europe and the UK is trying to attract Anthropic over to Europe as this kind of example of this divorce between the two entities, right? This fits exactly in with what I've been talking about for the rest of this video. So OpenAI president Greg Brockman and his wife gave a pro-Trump super political action committee $25 million last year. They are spending millions more to advance Trump's AI agenda in the midterm elections. So there's an example. After Claude was used in the Venezuela raid to capture former President Maduro in January, an Anthropic employee asked a counterpart at data mining firm Palantir, its partner, about how the technology was used. Defense Department officials learned about the exchange and viewed it as a challenge to the department's prerogative to have the final say in operational matters. So actually, part of the argument has also come out of what happened in Venezuela. It's all absolutely fascinating from a geopolitical point of view, because Anthropic, I mean, I don't know if this is happening. Apparently, they're back in conversation with the Pentagon. Benny Pye, you were telling me that. I don't know if that's correct. But Anthropic is to sue Trump administration over an AI lab after AI lab is labeled security risk. Now, you've got people like David Lawrence here saying the time has come, Britain is open, Anthropic should move to London, or at least dual list in London with a significant presence here, and then gives a whole load of reasons why. And then we hear that Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, not a fan of Trump. Trump is not a fan of him. Sadiq Khan has invited Anthropic to move to London. This is big potential. And people saying, look, they won't. There isn't the infrastructure. There isn't this. There isn't that. Seb Johnson here says OpenAI has just chosen London, so one of the big competitors, as its largest research hub outside the US. The UK has always been home to amazing technical AI talent, in large part thanks to Demis Hassabis and DeepMind, and now OpenAI is doubling down here. It currently has 30 researchers, but according to the Times, will be significantly increasing the size of the site. The company referred to London's unique concentration of world-class talent across machine learning and the sciences, as well as its strong culture of cross-disciplinary collaboration, as to why it's expanding here, and it's not wrong. This is amazing validation of the strength of the UK tech ecosystem. By the way, I could bore you, but loads of really big tech stuff has happened in the UK that is getting drowned out by Iran and Starmer. Everyone slags off the government at the moment, but they don't realize, and it's probably not the government's, they can't take plaudits for it necessarily, but there's loads of really positive stuff happening in UK tech going forward. Loads of unicorn stuff, investments, different phases of investment going on. Really big news in the tech industry has been totally drowned out by Starmer this, Starmer that, and bloody Iran. But actually, OpenAI, there are already these big offices in London. London is seen as something of a hub, and that's really, really important. Anyway, I just thought this was kind of a reflection also of this discussion about Europe being self-sufficient, not dependent on the US, and that's most importantly in both the military industrial sector, but also the tech sector. Really, really important. Now, when it comes to the US, part of why Europe kind of sees itself as a little bit different to the US, and this is really uncomfortable for British viewers. We're not big on the open. I know I'm an atheist, philosopher of religion, but that aside, even like we're traditionally, although we are starting to import a lot more brash American political. I mean, just see what's going on with regard to Iran and our right-wing media and the kind of reform wanting to import MAGA. There is a growing sense of this open religiosity, but traditionally we've been Church of England. We don't talk about religion, keep it quiet. And this happened in the White House, I think, yesterday.
I pray for your grace and your protection over him. Yes. I pray for your grace and protection over our troops and all of our men and women serving in our armed forces. Yes. And Father, we just pray you'll continue to give our president the strength that he needs to lead our great nation as we come back to one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, I find this really interesting because Donald Trump is seen by some evangelicals as like touched by Jesus, blah, blah, blah. He's not religious in any way. He's as atheist as I am, except I put some thought into it. He's just like, yeah, I'm out for myself. I'm my own God. He's more Ayn Rand. The individual is the God, right? He's just completely narcissistic. The universe isn't big enough for him and God. So there is no God. I think that's what goes on behind his orange visage. But he's a very useful tool for evangelicals, or they're just completely not reading the room. But this room, I mean, is very much an overtly, there's no separation of church and state here. The church is in the state. But then this video came out the other day, and it just, again, it makes me think about the differences between, I don't know, the churches in the UK and churches in the US. So when you start thinking about how Europeans view stuff that goes on in the American political sphere, and of course, this is just like anecdotal, but there is this kind of like, oh, I feel a bit uncomfortable about this. We'll do it the European way. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to turn the music off here, but of course it's a YMCA. And this is in a church where you have the kind of Trumpian pastor as the little toddler, I presume is like the older brother of the baby here. And you just like, what is going on? Like in this church, all laughing, it's all great, ha, ha, ha. But it's this mixture of religiosity, nationalism, as you can see with the flag, politics with a Trump 2024, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is probably an old video, but for me, there's something that is, I think, anathema to us in Europe generally, in terms of this kind of Christian nationalism that I think is a hallmark of the MAGA movement. But I think the UK is actually, not the UK, Europe is trying to, in some domains import that. Now, just if you, and it's interesting to note that the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security has been moved sideways. Some people say she's been fired, sacked. Very few people, only Mike Waltz, the National Security Counselor, he went his separate ways, but he was moved sideways to the UN. Here you've got Kristi Noem is now taking up, she's going to be part of the Shield of America or something, but I think she has been sacked. I mean, ICE has been controversial to say the least. And then her performance here was, I think she was ripped apart. And so they got rid of her. And for a bunch of reasons, I think she was often touted as the person who would be the next to go, right? And that has indeed happened. In fact, I said that some weeks back. But listen to, is it Joe Neguzzi here? Show you how corrupt the administration is and how corrupt she is. And this needs to be listened to.
Two of them were inaccurate, Madam Secretary. I'll read from the notice from your agency. Given the immediate action to significantly reduce illegal immigration and border crossings, DHS identified 4 companies. 4 of the hundreds of thousands of companies in the United States. You identified 4. One of those is this Safe America Media company. Where is Safe America Media headquartered?
I don't know.
I don't know either, Madam Secretary. We can't find it. We can't find a website. We did find an address that's registered for this company. Do you know where that address is?
Is there a problem with this contract?
I'll tell you about it.
According to
Madam
law,
Secretary, the
address
is registered to a political operative. Madam Secretary, the company, and then I'll give you an opportunity to respond. The company is registered to a political operative in Virginia. Do you know, just by way of example, whether this company that received $143 million in taxpayer dollars.
So what he's talking about is a company that has received a contract for $143 million, right? With no due process, no kind of checks and balances, just received a $143 million contract. No one knows who it is, where it's from, like the corruption and grift. Like, honestly, this is outstanding from Neguzzi. And it is, if you are American, right, this stuff is going on under the bonnet while Trump is going to war with Venezuela and Afghanistan and trying to distract away from the Epstein files. There is just rank corruption taking place to the tune of tremendous amounts of money.
Has it ever done work for the government before?
I don't know. I can't.
The answer is it has not. And do you know why we know that? Because it was incorporated 8 days before this contract went out. You want the American people to believe that this is all above board? Yes, that $143 million of taxpayer money just happened to go to this one company that doesn't have a headquarters, doesn't have a website, has never done work for the federal government before, and is registered apparently or attached to a residence from a political operative. And of course, one of the subcontractors of that contract, as you know, is a political firm that's tied to you back when you were governor of South Dakota. The reason why I ask these questions.
So tied to her personally as well. Like, this should be the sort of thing that brings down a government. And I think this is probably what caused her to be sacked. But it's kind of, or not move sideways. But it's like, oh, we've got found out.
Is that this is taxpayer money. And I presume, I don't know this for a fact, but Senator Tillis noted yesterday the way in which your agency is blocking the Inspector General from 11 different investigations that it is trying to conduct. I don't know if this happens to be one of them. I certainly hope it is, because eventually the facts will become public in this regard. And
he's really good. And I could watch that all day. Just the exposing of grift and corruption is absolutely insane. Now, it's all, you know, things are not going particularly well in the United States at the moment politically for the Republican Party, and there are quite a few indicators of this. You had James Tallarico absolutely handily winning the Democratic primary against he won it against Jasmine Crockett, but the handily bit is how many Democrats came out and voted in the primary compared to Republicans in Texas. And so there's this massive mobilization and that is taking place. But it wasn't just Texas. This is Democrats outvoting the GOP by nearly 200,000 votes in a North Carolina Senate race. So these are primaries. So it's not like they got 200,000 more people voting for their guy and their guy won an election. This is the amount of people that were interested enough to vote in a midterm year for someone running to be the Democratic representative. So Roy Cooper got 758,743 votes, and then there was another 42,000 for other people on that. And then here we've got 404 plus you can add 97,000 and then 35,000. But essentially the difference in vote numbers between who voted in the Republican primary and the Democrat primary shows you that Democrats are fired up. Right, you can look at the polls. The Republicans will say, well, look at the polls. The Democratic Party is not popular. Okay. Yeah, that not in and of itself, but compared to, that's irrelevant. You need to compare it to the Republican Party, and it's the reality is boots on the ground and votes in a ballot box, and at the moment it's looking very, very bad for the Republicans. Democrat Alex Holliday defeated Republican Brian Renshaw in the Arkansas State House District 70 special election. That's Arkansas flipping state Senate flipping from red to blue. That has happened something like however many times. There have been 0 flips from blue to red, and there have been something like 27, 29, I don't know, flips from Republican to Democrat. Arkansas State Supreme Court. Democratic aligned candidate in the Arkansas State Supreme Court race is outperforming Kamala Harris by 52 points. 47 points and 21 points respectively in Prairie, Pike and Garland counties, 95% reporting. Harris lost those by 31 points. Like, the shift from the last general election to now is absolutely insane. Republicans are going to be very, very nervous about the midterm elections. So Trump needs to be very careful here. Would he just cheat his way to victory? Probably. The Wall Street Journal, and this is an interesting cultural kind of reflection maybe of what's going on in the United States at the moment. This is a main story on the Wall Street Journal right now, actually a few days ago. Americans are leaving the US in record numbers. It's accompanied by a photo of Prague. Now, this is indeed true. They are leaving America at record levels, although it's quite difficult getting stats for this. But Americans are applying for British citizenship at the highest rate since records began in 2004, some 6,600 in a year to March 2025. They are securing Irish passports at a record pace, 31,825 in 2024, and an estimated 40,000 last year. Really big numbers. Here, someone says, I dived into the data. It's true. Let's go into it. The Wall Street Journal summary indicates that for the first time since the Great Depression, the US is experiencing negative net migration, meaning more people are departing the country than arriving. This trend is primarily driven by American citizens seeking better affordability and security abroad. Because the US government has not systematically tracked citizen exits since 1957, the Wall Street Journal reconstructed record-breaking numbers by aggregating residency permit data from over 50 foreign nations, international real estate acquisitions, and 100% surge in IRS expatriation filings. The Eisenhower administration originally halted the collection of this data in 1957 to streamline administrative costs and shit, blah, 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 blah. The point, you get the point, is that people are leaving the United States because they are worried about the state of affairs. Here is a spike in Americans seeking UK citizenship in growing numbers. The UK citizenship applications hit a record high at the end of 2025, with a particularly sharp rise in application from US nationals amid an increasingly febrile political climate in America under the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Trump is continuing to get his stranglehold on the media. CNN looks like it's going to come under the purview of Paramount, which is owned by the Ellisons, who are big Trumpites, and Paramount already owns CBS. CNN is likely to go this way. CBS, you've got people fleeing the ship there at CBS. CBS News producer Mary Walsh resigns after 46 years because, quote, we've been told to aim our reporting at a particular part of the political spectrum. Honestly, I don't know how to do that. In other words, we've been told to appeal to MAGA audiences. I just don't know how to do it. There you go. So there's a few little bits and pieces on the US. I want to just and here's for something completely different. This is a long one today. Lots is going on. Now for something completely different, something I've been wanting to talk about for ages, but it's going to talk about the environment and also energy. We forget about the environment. I'm a big environmentalist, and at least I'd like to be, but it turns out I'm more interested in war these days. UK coal demand in 2025 fell to the lowest level since 1600. New analysis, UK emissions fell 2.4% in 2025 as coal fell to. So our emissions have fallen 2.4% as we have got ourselves off coal. So the idea that we should be trying to embrace oil and gas at the moment when renewables and nuclear should be able to, and hydroelectric should be able to do a good enough job to sort us out, and they're becoming more efficient and better. I think that's something to be happy with, because do you know what? We should be slightly perturbed at the moment at the state of affairs in the world, environmentally speaking. You know, we've got wars doing all sorts. So this is a kind of situation, and this goes back to a conversation we've already had today. We would have much lower gas prices as they do in the US, says GB News, quoting from writer Ross Clark, explains how by reopening the North Sea, the UK could significantly reduce energy costs for Britons. I explained very quickly how that's just not possible. Like, if we drill more gas, it's going to be expensive to drill more gas. We can get it cheaper from Norway. It will be inflationary to us, and actually it goes on the global gas prices anyway. So it will have zero effect on bringing gas prices down. So if you don't know that and you're writing on it, then maybe write about something else. Chris Smith says, I repeat, drill the life out of the North Sea and you will, and all you want, but it will never lower our gas prices at 0.1% of the global reserves. It's just not significant enough to have any impact. Ross is lying. Anyway, from an environmental point of view, bad news. Rising ocean temperatures have been blamed for massive die-off of marine life. Researchers examined the year-on-year changes of 33,000 fish populations in the northern hemisphere, and they found a drop in biomass from chronic heating to be as high as 19.8% in a single year. We lost almost 20% of our fish in the northern hemisphere last year, not from overfishing, but by warming seas. H.I. Sutton, who's Covert Shores, good guy on open source intelligence to do with marine stuff. This is bad news on so many levels. And then we hear, this is just out, I think, on the 4th of March, global sea levels are actually higher than we thought they were. We've undercounted them. They've been underestimated due to poor modeling, according to research. Sea levels around the world have been underestimated due to inaccurate modeling, with research suggesting ocean levels are far higher than previously understood. The finding could significantly affect assessments of the future impacts of global heating and the effects of coastal settlements. Globally, the research found ocean levels are an average of 30 centimeters higher, and that is a lot in terms of the sea, than previously believed. But in some areas of the global south, including Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific, they may be 100 to 150, so 1 to 1.5 meters higher than previously thought. Things are not looking good, but there's some good news here, right? And I just want to leave you with some good news. So, French agrivoltaics trials show crops under solar panels had up to 18% higher yield. So when you put solar panels on fields, right, if you put them on places that do not have much growth because it's too sunny, you put solar panels there because it's so bloody sunny, it actually helps crops grow. And there have been areas, I saw a brilliant video of regrowing, it might be in an area of China, where they'd like regrown loads of area by having solar panels, because they not only protect from heat, but they trap moisture as well from evaporation from the soil and from plants. What's the hydro? So what's part of the rain, the water cycle? What's it when you get transpiration? Transpiration from leaves, where you get evaporation from leaves, basically, and from crops. So when you put these solar panels, they have up to 18% higher yields for the crops, far fewer heat stress days, cooler soils, and better animal welfare while generating clean power. This is a win-win. Governments should scale now. Brilliant. I love that. Here's another study. Solar panels shade helps boost Colorado grassland productivity in dry years. Interesting study reported here. While the grasslands under these panels grew slower in average in wet years, the grass grew much better in dry years, suggesting the panel's shade and precipitation concentrating effects help the grass to grow. Solar plus batteries is just going to win. Texas is going solar. It's over. So Texas can say what it likes from a political point of view, and Trump can. But look at this. Solar and battery storage combined drove 81% of new US grid capacity in 2025. So in 2025, new energy coming online, 81% of it was solar plus battery. It spiked. Why? Because it's economically sensible. This isn't about environmentalism. This is about the economy. And that's really important to note. So just a couple more to go through super quick here. Australia's wholesale electricity prices fell to the lowest in 4 years in 2025, validating claims that renewables can help lower consumer power costs. I've had some argument with people from Australia saying renewables can't do it because this is why you need to go and watch some of the videos I've been watching on the technical way that they have overcome. They have a problem with pricing and stuff to do with renewables or energy coming at certain parts of the day, so on and so forth. Anyway, they is being really beneficial for energy cost. That's the plan, says Tris Osborne, a British MP. It's happening here too, though we are behind the curve. Don't let Conservatives' big oil and gas interests and their lobbyists and pundit class tell you otherwise. And that's kind of where I'm at. Don't listen to the lobbyists. Listen to the experts, or just look at the data that's coming out. Australia isn't planning an energy transition, it's executing one. While nuclear and coal argue on paper, wind, solar and batteries have been added at nuke scale speed for nearly a decade, one nuclear equivalent per year. So basically renewables are adding energy at the equivalent of a nuclear power station a year. Here's a perspective on the speed of Australia's wind, solar and battery build out measured in nuclear power plants. So basically, it's just huge. And then you've got grid batteries and then prices and then so on and so forth. It's just, there's loads of stuff going on Australia that's really interesting. And solar does more to solve global electricity poverty than any other technology. Fossil fuel promoters often profess concern about global energy poverty, while the cost of oil imports alone crush many poor nations. But I've talked about this before. If you look at the Ember Energy report coming out in the last couple of years, the growth in places like Pakistan and Africa, poorer places are taking on solar panels because they're more affordable and they can get you power in places that are otherwise difficult to get power to, or they're just better options. Solar and batteries are now the low-cost solutions for energy poverty. Really interesting. But Donald Trump has ordered the US Defense Department to buy coal-generated electricity. So US administration is directing the Department of Defense to buy coal power and spending $175 million to keep aging coal plants running. So although Texas is showing you, the future, ideologically from the top in the US, you've got Trump saying, no, we need to spend more money keeping old coal power plants open because I love me some hydrocarbons. Coal plants average 44 years old. Many are costly and prone to outages. Markets, not ideology, are driving their decline. But ideology in his case is keeping it open. So there you go. Right. Okay. That's enough for me. I need to get to some of your comments and super chat. So thank you very much. I've been just too busy to go through your comments today. So sorry. It's been a long one. If you're here for it. Thank you very much to Richard Bennett for gifting ATP Geopolitics membership. Here, Kevin Devane says from Ireland, the US has to be viewed as a clear and present danger to all our safety in the Western world. End of. So very firm Irish opinion there. Arne Anderson here, thank you for your Norwegian love. The Gulf states start a war against Iran. They forgot that they already are at war by keeping US bases on their land. I mean, I'm a bit confused about the Gulf states' positioning because to some degree, they have been wanting the US to be involved in this war, but we don't know whether they're driving it or post facto saying, yeah, that's great, do it, and justifying it after the fact. But now they seem to be not so happy about it. So yeah, but thank you, Arne. Really appreciate that. Trump insulted your British troops only just a few weeks ago and suggested they weren't useful in Afghanistan. So now he wants their assistance. Yeah, the hypocrisy knows no bounds. I have to admit. The billionaire class is at war with the free press. First, they'll hijack corporate media, and then they'll come for independent media like the media blackout in the Persian Gulf. They don't want the truth. Arctic Dread says, I agree. I'm really worried about the state of media in the world and the oligarchs controlling it. I think it's really, really problematic. Zeb Carter gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, Zeb. You're a total legend. Doris begs you to hit the like button now, says Paul Gilbert with the super chat. Thank you, Paul. And yes. Yeah, this is interesting. Jane Pierce. My mum's called Jane Pierce, but we spell it properly. You've unfortunately misspelt it there, Jane. But I'll let you off. We must include Ukraine in our new version of NATO. We need their expertise. It's a really good point. If Europe does do that, then we need a Ukraine that succeeded to the EU from an EU point of view, but also Ukraine in that replacement to NATO, if that is actually going to be a thing. Benny Pie, Unitree are making robots with AI brains, AI large language models trained in simulation with realistic physics faster than real time. The model is then transplanted into the robot hardware. We are living in the Terminator world, Benny. Just don't tell me stuff like this. I won't sleep at night. Actually, I will sleep. I sleep relatively easily. It's not a problem, even if the world's burning around me. Just get a good night's sleep. Actually, I don't get a good night's sleep because I'm thinking about what to do with Ukraine. Like, I don't count sheep. I count bloody ATACMs and stuff. Benny Pie, Unitree's AI world model is open source as well. Wow. Okay. Benny Pie knows what he's on about. Trump will foam at the mouth when he hears about Sadiq's offer. Yeah, for Claude and Anthropic. Now, Woods of the Ruse, India is industrializing by skipping fossil fuels. I did mention this a couple of months ago. Like the data coming out from India is that they have gone from, they're not going through the whole developing fossil fuels to a massive degree. We now got to a point in technology where they can skip that and they can upscale just at the endpoint where we are at the moment, which is really interesting. Yes. Been panicking about environmental issues for over 70 years. Common sense policy brings in modern ideas from all sources is key. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you. It's really kind. Ronnie says, I never say it enough. Thank you, Jonathan. I wish I had the same focus. Yeah, my focus has been not enough on your comments today, so sorry about that. Rob Cook, funny fact, coal is or was responsible for more environmental radiation than nuclear plants. Wow. I need to look into that. Interesting one. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Just Jimmy says, Ukraine needs to send NABU, their anti-corruption unit, to sort out corruption in the USA. Honestly, the level of corruption, I think it will all come out in a wash. 5-10 years time, we'll be looking back on this period going, wow, that happened. Wow. New battery breakthroughs to change energy storage. This is true. Who's popping? The new sodium batteries, absolutely insane. Honestly, I don't think people realize the energy density, the cheapness of the new CATL batteries being produced at the moment en masse. They can store more. They don't suffer from cold, from heat. They don't catch fire. They're safer. They're better. They're cheaper. It's insane. And you can charge them like millions of times. They can do, no, not millions of times. You can get, if you put them in a car, you can get millions of miles. The battery will last longer than the cars. Full stop. End of. So the battery changes are huge. Little Whiskey Shop. Q1 2025. Low renewable generation occurred during Dunkelflaute, low wind and low solar, causing gas-fired power to rise to its highest quarterly level since 2021 because renewables underperformed. And this is the thing. It's not about renewables reliance. It's about, or it's partly reliant on renewables, but it's about having a base load that can react. And at the moment we're using gas, but the problem is our pricing mechanism then, because gas is more expensive, links it to the most expensive marginal pricing. So we need to change that somehow. We need to reform our pricing, and we need to have people stop blaming net zero for our pricing scenario, because it's not responsible, or at least, you know, it might be marginally responsible for some price increases, but not to the degree that it is claimed. But yes, thank you for that, Mark. And it's a wonder that Trump didn't burst into flames while they were praying over him. This is true. I'm more Christian than Trump, and I'm an atheist, says Michael Lanning. This is true. And by the way, when I talk about stuff like this for this channel, I'm never trying to alienate anyone who is religious. I am an atheist, but I'm not saying that you should be as well. I mean, I do think that. I've written books on that, and I've got a whole other channel where I've talked about that. ad infinitum, well, not ad infinitum, it's gathering cobwebs at the moment, but there's a time and a place for that. For this, it's a broad church, like the pun there, where we're all just hopefully morally on the same page as each other, even if we have different belief systems on different beliefs, and if we have different political views. Although obviously I have very strong political views in one way, and if you can get past me banging on about that and engage, for example, Mark here from the Little Whiskey Shop disagrees with me vehemently about British politics, right? But we have conversations about that, and it's about good faith dialogue. And people who disagree with us in the live chat, as long as it's good faith dialogue and not trolling, then we should be welcoming that. Rafami here says, having photovoltaics on the roof, heat exchanger in the house, and an e-car in the carport, I give an F about energy prices earning money on top of. So I'm like you. I have solar panels and I have electric cars. So I'm living the dream, so to speak. And I did something the other day. I showed Mark and Benny and whatnot in the back channel we've got where we chat. Because I've got MS and I'm not very mobile these days, and I'm trying to make the house a bit of a smart house where things can happen with me just asking them to happen. I haven't worked it out with making tea yet, but I spent the best part of a week, because me up a ladder and down a ladder, it takes me at least 5 times as long to do anything DIY. I drop things, I can't feel my fingers at all. DIY is really difficult for me. It really is challenging. I may look really able to you because I'm doing this. My legs don't really work and I can't feel my fingers. And if you can't feel your fingers, anything to do with screws, there's no feedback loop. When I operate a mobile phone, a remote controller, I can't do it by feel. I have to look at it to change the channel. You guys will do it by feel. I just can't feel stuff. And so DIY is really difficult. And I used to be a real DIY, fix everything myself, build stuff myself. I don't do that anymore. I have to get people in. And it's just really frustrating. But we got an electric curtain rail, right? Bought it off the internet. And I just asked, I say, Alexa, open the curtains. I've set it to a routine. So at sunrise and sunset, they open and close. And it took me like 4 or 5 days to put this bad boy up, and a lot of swearing. But I got there in the end, and it's really cool. I'm really happy with it. And it opens and closes when I say. And I'm like, hey, I've entered modern life. Next, I'll be getting one of those robots to, after it's beaten the crap out of me and ask me for my lunch money, I'm going to get it to make me a cup of tea. Because that's the future we're living in. Just thought I'd share that with you. It's not very interesting. Anyway, thank you guys. Yeah, I've got 2. So actually, one of them was helping me a little bit, clearly not enough, and through gritted teeth, taking away from his playing Siege on PlayStation. Yes, but also it's uncomfortable for me to do. I don't like moving. It's uncomfortable to move. I don't like walking. It's uncomfortable to walk. I don't like it. So therefore, I don't do it enough. I need to make myself do more things. Otherwise, I just sit here and talk to you all day. And that's what we're doing now. And I need to go. I need to do things with other humans, the ones that I'm related to, not you guys. But thank you guys. I love you. Big love. And crazy times in the world. It is hopefully what I am. Appreciate that. Thank you, Matt West. Lopside. I hopefully am reading it right, what's going on in the world at the moment with regard to the movements in Europe. And it is fascinating to see what's going to go on with the UK for me. In that place that's outside the EU and outside the United States, while everyone's beating each other up, where do we go to protect ourselves? And I'm slightly worried about that, because I think we could be in trouble. We're not protected. So it's really interesting. Oh God, my long goodbye. It's really interesting listening to the Spanish Minister of Culture, who was talking earlier in the video, where he said, we feel protected. Spain, like the EU said, we're going to stand up for you against the United States. We feel protected. And that's not something that we can say in the UK, because there might be rhetorical protection, but there isn't like single market protection. There isn't customs union protection. There isn't economic and political protection. And I do worry in this age of empires that the UK might get a bit left out. Right, that's enough. Thanks, Benny. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Big love. Speak to you soon.